Right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are. Welcome to the online MuleSoft meetup. My name is Royston Lobo, and I'll be your host for today. So let's get into it. So before we get started with our panel, just wanted to run you through what we. So these are the organizers of the online meetup. So that's me, third over there on the right. I work as a technical architect in the customer success team here at MuleSoft. I'm currently based out of Singapore. And we also have Manik, Suyog, and Angel, who are co-leaders of this meetup and based all around the world. So if you haven't joined a meetup with our group before, welcome. Thank you for joining us for the first time. And if you'd like to be notified about future events, please visit that link where you will find all our past events as well as any future events that we have coming up. Just some guidelines for today. So we are in a virtual meetup. So the best way to engage with us is to use the chat functionality that's within this meetup platform. So you will notice on the right-hand side that there's a chat menu. I will also be publishing a Q&A link shortly where you can ask your questions as well for the panel. So if you have your questions, that's a great way to engage as well. If you have any thoughts or comments about the discussions today, you can put that in the chat. That's a good way of engaging with the rest of the audience. But questions, I would prefer if you use the questions link, and that way you also get an opportunity to vote on other people's questions. So that will help me with moderating them. So the plan for today is I have a few MuleSoft updates to cover, and then we'll get straight into our panel. And we have a wonderful panel joining us today, so I'm really excited for it. So to kick off the updates, this is the first online meetup since the winners of our MuleSoft Hackathon were announced. So huge congratulations to all the winners from the hackathon. In first place, we had Pat O'Hara, who came up with an idea around COVID-19 symptom checking. It's amazing the amount of effort that has been put into all the submissions. And the best part is that all the submissions are available for you to view. They've got many of them have detailed videos, solution designs, code, everything is open source. So I strongly recommend, if you haven't yet seen the winners and the submissions, to have a look. I will be putting up these slides on the event page after the event within the next 12 hours. So you can click through on the links and get to it. If you'd like to stay on top of future news in the developer space, we now have a new MuleSoft developers community LinkedIn page where you can learn about upcoming meetups, blogs, tutorials, and anything else that's of relevance to us as a developer community. Just a shout out on a couple of blog posts that are out there. So for those of you who are constantly using connectors, there are a whole range of new and upgraded connectors that have been released. This is just a snapshot of some of them. So if you have any of them in your projects or you're considering using any of them, I strongly recommend you have a look just to make sure that you're using the latest version because that's the one that's going to be best supported and usually with the most features as well. And we also have the Friends of Max series. So for those of you who haven't heard of it yet, Friends of Max is a video enablement series that are created by many of my colleagues in customer success. There's a whole range of topics, and these are usually less than 10 minutes long. So they're really bite-sized, easy to learn from, and they're quite friendly for you to implement and practice. So you'll see that there's a wide variety of topics that are in here. Some of the newer videos that have been launched are on the right-hand side of the screen. I strongly recommend, once again, if you are looking for some learning or some new capability, visit these videos. The one that I would strongly recommend is the Metrics Accelerator installation steps. If you haven't heard about it, it's a good way to get introduced and see how that works. Right, to conclude the intro, after this event, you will be receiving a survey from the MuleSoft Meetup platform. Please fill it out. It's a great way to say thank you to our panelists because we do look at the feedback. If you would like to contribute, whether it should be through presentations or some other means, you can either use the meetups at mulesoft.com, you can contact the organizer from the event page, Or on the Meetup website, there is a section where you can either choose to nominate yourself as a Meetup leader or a Meetup speaker. So there's a number of ways you can contribute. We're lucky enough to have a vibrant community. So I strongly encourage you to contribute in any way that you feel compelled to. Fantastic. So our next meetup in the online group is next week. One Main's Financials MuleSoft Journey. This will be hosted in the North American time zone. So we've got the event page up already. If you're available at the time, please join in. Otherwise, it will be recorded, so you will be able to catch it after the event as well. And on that note, the slides and recordings from today's event will also be published on the event page within the next 12 hours. With that, so the topic for today is we have a panel, and we have a panel of people who come with a wide variety of experiences in both the MuleSoft space as well as outside of the MuleSoft space. So I'm very grateful that our panelists have taken the time out of their day to prepare for the panel, as well as share their experiences around their MuleSoft journey. The topic we've got here is around evolving legacy architectures. And just a bit of background on this topic. It's nice for us to think that every organization is a greenfield, and that we have the ability to design the latest and the greatest from the suite of tools we have on offer. But the reality is that most of us work in organizations where we don't have the luxury of having a greenfield environment. And quite often we have systems that are older than our careers. And what that means is that when we get into these organizations, and quite often we're in the integration space, we need to understand, how do we tackle the challenge of actually taking something that is proven, is usually robust and foolproof, and then evolving that to something that can meet the needs of the organization going into the future. So quite often the discussions I have is around mainframe systems or core banking systems that have proven their worth over decades. But evolving them is challenging because a lot of them don't come in with capabilities like APIs and other things that we consider contemporary. So this discussion panel is focused around tackling that challenge. And there's multiple angles to it. There's going to be the angle of, how do we do it at a technical level? How do we do it at a business and organizational level? And our panelists have had experience at different elements of this challenge, which is why we are very lucky to have them with us today. So without much further ado, I will now pass over to each of our panelists for a brief introduction. They've also contributed something on their slide. So I'll kick off with Dom. Dom, if you could briefly introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll pass it on to, I think it's Nadeem who's next. Over to you, Dom.
Awesome. Thanks, Royston. Morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, wherever you're located. So my name is Dom Masters. I'm the integration practice lead and technical architect at Tequila ANZ. We're a Salesforce and MuleSoft implementation organization. And within my role at Tequila, I provide support and governance to the integration team members who are spread out around Australia, primarily Sydney and Melbourne. And then, like most people, it's basically whatever needs doing within the business in the integration space. Experience using MuleSoft. So from an integration perspective, I've essentially spent my entire career working in integrations from back in the old RS-232 days through to integration platforms, commercial off-the-shelf products and so on, specifically with MuleSoft for the last 3 years, which has essentially been my time at Tequila. And a fun, interesting fact about myself, other than what's there, the thing that I'm happiest about at the moment is I've actually managed to snafu a PS5, which I don't know if anyone else out there has tried, but they are almost impossible to get. So that is my crowning achievement at the moment.
Well done, Dom. And be honest, is it for yourself or for other people in your family?
Oh no, Lucky's got an Xbox, so the PS5 is just for me.
Fantastic. Well done. 2021's off to a good start for you.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Next up, we have Lily. Layli, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Roshan. Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Laili Mukherjee, and I'm from India. And I'm currently in Australia. So I'm working with a company called Sigma Healthcare, and I'm responsible for MuleSoft integration architecture with their the legacy system journey from the existing customer journey from legacy to we are coming to MuleSoft platform in the integration part with the ERP solution in SAP and Salesforce, of course. So I have 18 years of experience. Out of that, 5 years in MuleSoft. But if I can go a little bit in older world, I saw MuleSoft when it was CLI version of it. And later when I saw the platform version, I was very excited. And now into MuleSoft after looking the new things. It was the way it has been evolved really great. So apart from that, I'm certified as well. And so I worked in the various area like US, UK, and Australia currently. Yes, the fun fact about myself is that I enjoy coding, of course. But since I'm in Australia right now, I'm just locked down here for 1 year. But I wanted to visit Australia to see new things. Apart from that, I love gardening to stress out right now, and I love traveling. So that's the way I across the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Layli. It's amazing to see how long you've been using the platform. You must have seen so much evolution over the time. I think you've seen the evolution of the Mule legacy architecture as well.
Yeah, that's true. It's fantastic to work. Thank you.
So next up we have Nadeem. Nadeem didn't really believe in the power of words on the screen, so he wanted to articulate what he had to share.
Oh.
So Nadeem, take it away.
Yeah, so Nadeem here, morning and evening order. So I'm an integration advocate at the Census, an advertising company or digital management company, right? So I have like around about 7 to 8 years experience purely on the MuleSoft side, or we would say an integration side of things, right? And I'm a more in terms of designing and the more in terms of team management side of the integration side. So my day-to-day activities are very different hats in a given day, be it an requirement gathering or a solution design, or also I enjoy coding and reviewing as such, right? And the fun fact is that I love playing cricket, and I'm a avid cricket player. I'm a fast bowler, and in my spare time, I coach a local Faulkner cricket club over here. Candidates around about like 15 to 16 years, right? And been blessed with 2 kids. I live in Melbourne, and I'm happy to go forward in terms of this, how this virtual meetings goes. This is my first time. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nadeem. It's a pleasure to have you. And next up, we have Rob. Over to you, Rob.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Rob Harris. I am the product owner for the API platform at New Zealand Post in Wellington, New Zealand. So I'm originally from Canada, but I've been living in Wellington for about 9 years. So I'm also the product owner for our API simplification program. And so I described that really quickly in my elevator speech as killing horses at New Zealand Post. So I say this is figuratively speaking. If you've seen the agile sort of progression from scooter into car. That's where that idea has come from, where when someone at New Zealand Post says, I want a new car, we say, sure, that's no problem, but you have to make it out of this old horse, which I think is kind of relevant to the conversation that we're having today, in that with a lot of the old legacy systems that we have are what I'm calling old horses, that we want to get rid of. So that's essentially what I'm responsible for, and deriving the priority order of how that's going to take place here. I've only been working with MuleSoft since July 2018, so not very much. Feel like I'm probably a bit of the newbie among everybody else here. So I guess an interesting fact about myself, so I've quite involved in the local stand-up comedy scene here in Wellington. I've traveled all around New Zealand performing stand-up comedy. I produce a show every week. It's called The Medicine. So sometimes I get paid to tell jokes. That all started off in Melbourne, actually, Nadeem. So I used to work at the Comics Lounge, if you've ever been there in North Melbourne. I worked there for a little bit, and now I've carried that over to here. I think I have a pretty good sense of humor. You might get a sense of that by the time we're done today. That's it.
That is wonderful, Rob. I think you might put in your I think you've already put in your nomination to be meetup host for next time.
Great.
Because we certainly have a role going for comedians as meetup hosts.
Integration funny.
Maybe the MuleSoft meetup nightly talk show.
Be a huge audience. Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. So let's go over to our panel. So the good news for our audience today is that if you do have questions, we now have a mechanism for you to ask your questions on screen. So if you can type in that URL, let's see if I can copy and paste it to help you guys out. You can post in your questions here, and everyone else has the ability to upvote your questions as well. So that becomes quite useful. And I already have some questions to start us off with. So in the meanwhile, that gives you time to think about some questions that you'd like to ask our panelists for today. So I've just popped in the link in the chat for everyone who'd like to engage with us on the questions. All right, so let's kick off. First off, let's head over to Nadeem and check in with you, Nadeem. I have this question for you. So with the career that you've had so far, what strikes you as a legacy architecture that you really didn't like the look of, and so every time a project came along, you had to, wrestle the beast? When you think about such a project or a system, what do you look back as what went well with the approach? And if someone was to go ahead with tackling a legacy system right now, like the ones you were dealing with, what sort of advice would you give them? Nadeem, I believe you might be on mute.
So we had quite a huge number of challenges in terms of maintaining the legacy system or an architecture. The first was that the cost of maintaining was very high compared to the cost of actual development, right? So in order to change if you get any sort of a business requirement, to implement that requirement, it was very hard because we did not get some sort of expertise skills to code that. One classic example was that one of the department in US Treasury was running IBM mainframes way back like 40-30 years, right? And it was very hard for us to touch the code. We had a feeling that any changes in the code or any update in the code might break or crashes the whole thing. And to that, we went in a different approach wherein we had to go back to the refactoring of the code, wherein we had to slowly decouple the requirements or the components and start development into some sort of an SOA architecture or the microservices side of things, right? And one of the challenges was we did not get any expertise skill set, and the cost was very high, and the time to bring that feature to the market was very time consuming as such.
All right, Nadeem, and I guess when you left the organization, did you see that the organization had found a better way of having to deal with this legacy architecture?
Yes. So what we did is that the legacy architecture was slowly being moved into some sort of an API layered way. Like we implemented or wrapped the legacy system with the system APIs, right? The domain model from the legacy system was being abstracted into the system APIs. We were quickly enough to expose that as a REST call or sort of an SOA call on the top of a system API. So we tried with a Spring integration framework, but that was not well full-fledged compared to MuleSoft as such. So what we did is that we did some sort of a POC whether the design, the architecture can play in role. And then we wrap that around the MuleSoft layer called as a system API, expose that, And we did not have that sort of a business logic in the system or the orchestration logic in the system. So we moved to the process API, and from there it was exposed to the outside world.
Thank you for that, Nadeem. Rob, I have a question for you in your role as a product owner. I'm curious if you've ever inherited a product that is backed by a system that you would consider legacy, and how you've approached that from a product owner perspective. So for example, have you had to advocate for change in the system? Have you had to deal with a forced evolution, or have you had to force an evolution?
That's essentially my entire role at the moment is moving us off of old legacy technology and pushing us towards the API-led architecture structure that MuleSoft is advocating. It's definitely part of what I do. Most of quite a number of the technology, the systems that we have at Post are big monolithic applications, and so there's a lot of work that we've done in order to try to have a look into which ones we wanted to migrate over to the new structure first. Yeah, is that what you mean? Or like, yeah, so I've inherited
Yes.
all of them, and I need to change quite a number of them, so in a bit of a hurry. So it's yeah, it's definitely been a bit of a challenge. So I'm advocating
so just
change
a question
100%.
to follow up on that one. And from an organizational perspective, do you find that it's a battle to get those changes endorsed, or is it something where you get a mandate from the top saying, we need a new system? Rob, go ahead and figure out how to make this work with
yes is the answer to both of those questions. So there definitely is a desire to see all of these legacy applications removed, and I've been usually quite sort of overwhelmed or impressed by how much people want to hold on to those same familiarity of the tools that they're using, and so you're kind of doing a little bit of two battles at the same time, being able to demonstrate what does need to be changed, how it's going to approach, how it's not going to have a customer impact, or as little customer impact as possible, while making their lives easier in the process. So that would, I think Nadeem had mentioned the cost of maintenance. So that's something that we would encounter in terms of like incidents. Mean time to reduction can be reduced. A number of incidents in general is going to go down. It's easier to solve problems with any of any of the benefits that you would see from a more modern application, like monitoring, for example. Yeah, so it's always a sort of, you got to push your way through all the changes, even when it's something that the company wants. They want to know why. So approve it, basically.
Excellent.
No problem.
Thank you, Rob. Dom, I have a question for you. So you've had, I guess, the luxury of being a consultant in the industry for a while. I'm curious what you recall as favorite anecdotes around this topic of evolving legacy architectures. So, for example, does a particular story or an example come to mind where this was done really well or done really poorly that you would tell your your grandchildren about? This is what you shouldn't do.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a consultant. Yeah, there's a few issues and so on that you encounter wherever you go, and to protect the innocent, I won't mention any names and so on. Specifically architecturally, we haven't, or at least I haven't run into too many major issues with legacy systems, other than and you briefly touched on this at the start, in terms of just getting the data out can be a huge issue when there are no APIs available to you and so on. And that's a fairly major struggle at times. Other issues are just political, as in, yep, understand you need this data, but it's in a different business unit, so we're not going to give this other business unit access to that information and so on. So on a political front, it can get quite interesting at times, unless you have project buy-in from much higher up within an organization. And as a consultant sitting on the outside looking in, that can be challenging, shall we say. Yeah, just looking at some of the internal politics is just crazy at times, and that's probably one of the fun bits that I'll take away with me as a consultant. You just want to get in there sometimes and shall we say rattle the chains and so on to try and get some of this stuff done, but there's a limit obviously as an external as to what you can do. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Dom. Layli, did you have anything you wanted to add to that response from Dom, from your experience?
Yes, for the integration part, not even Dom, I also add something on the Nadeem part. So we also face some of the legacy system a lot with the connectivity and the way they need to convert their manual work into the automated phase. So when we landed one of the customer, they were in the insurance, and the insurance has the claims as well, and they do all the claiming papers and other things manually. So this is the hardest part of the customer to deal with the legacy system. And so we came up with the MuleSoft, how they can do it, and it should be secure as well. They were reluctant to do, but somehow the way it worked from the legacy to automating the MuleSoft, they liked it. So apart from that, what also we are doing right now with the legacy system here, we are right now the project which I'm working, they're all in the legacy, and we are converting into the Mule 4, which is the API-led architecture. And I liked it because you can do various things in the MuleSoft platform right now, which was not there earlier in 3.8 version. And also the best thing also, if you're having the inbuilt system which you cannot have the connector already available in MuleSoft, you can build a connector in that, and with the help of that you can easily connect, and maintenance is really low. So hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much, Layli. And I guess if you were to think about your own experiences, you mentioned how you've had such a long career in a number of countries. What stands out to you as something that was an organization that did this really well? Like, what were some of the characteristics of that organization? Sorry, Layli, were you able to get the question?
Sorry, can you please repeat? Yeah.
Of course, yes. So from your experiences in the past, what comes to you as an example of an organization? You don't have to name them, but just some of the characteristics of an organization that has handled the challenge of evolving legacy architectures really well.
Yes, so they were having more than 200 to 300 applications that need to be from a connectivity point of view, from legacy to the new world, and they want to do that. And there we saw the excellent example of MuleSoft when we provided the demonstration with them how they can do it, and that too very automated and very feasible way. Later also they can, if they want to add few more application, they can do it very easily. So so I'm not naming the company name, but yes, we did that. And apart from that, there is a various other, in my 5 or 6 year of experience in the MuleSoft, we did a lot in from legacy to when I was working in US. So they wanted some application that to be their complete tightly built in legacy system, and we need to go and find it out the best solution, which integration platform we can connect to so that they can work easily. So when we provided the detail for the MuleSoft, because when I saw the MuleSoft that came up from CLI to this platform version, it was looking great to me, and it to build in the Eclipse for the any platform in which you can do your work easily, and also can push it to cloud, and it's you no need to worry about that. regarding the performance. Just increase few of the things and do the changes at the cloud end, and you are good to go. So no maintenance in the vertical or horizontal scaling in that case. So they were very happy with the cost basis, but when we provided the POC out of that, they were really, really happy because less coding and you can good to go. So the requirement was within 3 months, you can build your integration in such a way that it can ready to market. And that was the best example of the MuleSoft we did. And it was with a zero bug, it was introduced and the product came up very, very well. Yeah, one of the best.
Thank you, Lily. All right, we have had a few questions come in from our audience, so I'll present one of them on screen, and I'll read them out, and whoever in the panel feels most compelled to answer it, let me know. Otherwise, I'll be picking at random. All right. So the question is, when dealing with legacy systems, how did you balance between managing both legacy and new systems in parallel, and the plan to move into a modernized platform? And additionally, how did you control the total cost of ownership? So perhaps, I guess, we can start off with Rob on this one to, I guess, at the initial, scoping and bringing legacy system. I have a little bit to add to the question, Rob, for you. How do you also decide between tactical investments in these legacy systems? So for example, you have a stakeholder who comes jumping up and down saying, I want this feature tomorrow. And the only way it can be done is in the legacy system. But the strategic option is to build the feature or wait for the new architecture, the new system. I was curious if you've had to deal with that challenge. So over to you, Rob, on
the challenge question of trying to satisfy the immediate needs versus something that should be long-term implementation. Well, COVID highlighted something for us actually quite well, because New Zealand went into complete lockdown, the whole country for about 4 weeks. So none of the stores were open, nothing was open, and then once they started to open up, everyone started to buy things online, which naturally overwhelmed pretty much the entire system for New Zealand Post. So we were considered an essential service, and everyone was sending stuff through New Zealand Post. So we saw unprecedented volumes, more than like a Christmas time, which is normally when we have our busiest time of year. And so that caused a few things to start breaking, and so we had to take a look first of all at what wasn't working well enough. Definitely had some conversations with some high-level executives for some of our clients, wondering why the labeling, why they couldn't print labels at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning, wasn't working, and so we had to dig into those. And so those were sort of the high value. We took a look at what was going to be the highest value fix, and what was going to take the least amount of time. And sort of had a bit of a WSGIF priority call on those. There is a little bit of managing between the two of them, and so I think we had there was an initial decision point that got made around what type of product they would be purchasing, and as we were peeling them away slowly, we would direct them to either the legacy system or over to the new one, which was built within the structure, the architecturally approved structure that we wanted to do. So it was handling both at the same time. And what we try to do here is build the value, push into production as often as we can. So like once we'd finished our sprint or a couple of sprints, we wanted to make sure that all these were being used right away. And I think for some of our labeling, a customer was going through, I forget, between 5 and 10% failure rate under this really high load, and then when we moved them over to the new system, it was right down to 0%, which was awesome. And so that makes people happy. Definitely the sales team, they tend to have a lot of sway and influence around the company. That can be a bit of a pest, but so keeping them happy is pretty important. They're frontline to customers, which is great. I love getting frontline customer feedback. So really pointing out the work that you're doing is beneficial to the bottom line that way is quite simple, and at the same time we were able to upgrade all the APIs that we have for our labeling process.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob. Is there anyone else on the panel who wanted to contribute to that question? You don't have to, but if you had something to share, more than happy to hear.
One thing I would like to add, when you're moving from legacy to you're coming to the MuleSoft, you must first analyze whether you are able to do in such a customization you can do so that it less effort later and then you are able to achieve whatever you need to plug into it. So that's of course there's the thumb rule of when you are moving from any legacy to and you want to move to the integration platform as in MuleSoft. Thanks.
Thank you, Lily. It actually leads to our next question perfectly well. So this one I'd like to hear from you, Lily, first, and then Nadeem. So the question is, what was your strategy in modeling the domain models of the legacy systems? Did you go with a canonical model approach or a bounded context or some other approach? So Lily, I'll put this one to you first.
Like Naveen to go first. Can you give me 1 minute?
That's okay.
So
Nadeem,
we
over
didn't
to
go with
you.
the bounded context because of the complexity of the domain model. So what we did is that we went with a canonical model, wherein we consider that as an enterprise integration pattern to minimize the dependencies between different services or the different components as such. In other words, we could say that it becomes an independent data format, and the transformation or the translation logic was done in a process API, right? So this gives that our canonical domain model was not tightly with the system APIs, be it a Salesforce or an SAP or any other legacy systems. So I did not have any chance or any experience in terms of an bounded context, but rather we went with a canonical and it was a successful, I would say.
Thank you, Nadeem. Lily, is there anything you wanted to add to that answer?
I worked with both, but yes, the best approach with when we moved in the API-led, and prior to that, when it was not even API-led connectivity in the free, we try to minimize with the help of how customization you can do. And later when the 4 has come, we slightly migrate from 3 to 4, and the 4 has very good API-led approach that what Nadeem described. Yes, and that's the way we have done. But you need to be a little bit very cautious when you are developing your application, how good customization you can do with your API-led, so that it should not be bottlenecked later. That what we faced earlier when I joined one of the company. They developed already in 4, but it was not properly well patterned development. So we did little bit customization. So be sure that you are going in the right approach, I must say. Thanks.
Thank you. Dom, we have a subtle variation to this question that has been asked. I'll just present it up on screen. Just give me a moment. So the question is, how did you manage the data composition and aggregation out of the legacy systems? Is this something that you've encountered in your experience as a challenge?
It's a bit of a tricky one. As a consultant coming in, oftentimes there's a lot of background context that you just don't have visibility of. So there's a lot of involvement of the subject matter experts within the organization that you're working with that understand a lot of those nuances that as an external, you just don't have the bandwidth to take that on with the short time involved in the project for us. So unfortunately, I and the team need to rely fairly heavily on the internal folks in the organization that we're working with to work through those particular issues. So unfortunately, with the role that I have within the integrations, I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. Yes, so essentially we would work with whoever the SMEs are in the organization. that the integrations are being developed for, but probably don't have enough background information to be able to work specifically with those nuances and subtleties between the common data models of the various objects required. So I know that doesn't really answer your question, but it's Excellent. Sort of, yeah, we just don't have the domain knowledge to be able to answer those sorts of questions for an organization.
Fair enough. Thank you, Dom. Rob, I was thinking in terms of your experience as a product owner, have you ever had the conflict arise where you've either got the ability to make a decision to modernize an existing legacy system versus having to invest in something net new? And if that has come up for you, like how does an organization, how do you go about advising people around you around those decisions?
We've got a pretty strict line here around no investing in legacy technology, and so that's come from the top down. Or if you do need to make a change into it, you also have to plan and demonstrate how you're going to remove it later. And so that all becomes part of the funding model for any sort of business case that's being put forward. So here's the new thing that we need to do, or it's an immediate fix that needs to happen. Or if it doesn't fit within the priority of my team, then it gets outsourced to another company if they need it right away. And our team would review it before it would go in, and the external vendor would need to support it for the first quarter that it's been implemented. I mean, sometimes there's changes that people want to make in various different languages that we use here. And there's just we don't have the developers at New Zealand Post to do it. So it's all completely outsourced. And I know that quite often there's that analogy that's made about APIs being the server in a restaurant. Well, if you're a restaurant owner and one of your servers doesn't speak the same language, technically it doesn't even work for you, and every time you want to talk to them, it costs money. The conversation isn't always that difficult. So you say, let's maybe have our own people do that conversation or that communication anyway. So it's a pretty firm line, really, to prevent. It's really just protected, made sure that we're not investing in those old technologies. There's been a decision to stick with, well, in this case, obviously it's MuleSoft as the preferred platform, and a real top-down approach of this can't be. You can't invest in these old technologies anymore. We need to move forward. We have 20 years or so, I think, of technological debt to pay off, and debt charges interest, so it gets worse the longer you wait, and that's sort of what we're going through at the moment.
Thank you for sharing that, Rob. We have a few more questions that have come in, so let's have a quick look. So this question is, what should ideally happen if we want to integrate a legacy system to our existing application network, and that legacy system is very difficult to take apart and re-architect, and there's no way or very limited way to achieving connectivity to these legacy systems. So I guess the response that could potentially be is, have you encountered such a situation, and if so, what sort of approaches do you think would work going ahead if you were to see it again? Nadeem, do you have a response to this one?
What we did is that we went and reassessed the legacy architecture, and if there are no ways that you could expose that into an HTTPs or some sort of a file transfer service, what we did is that any record in the database can be triggered as an event, right? So what we did is that we implemented an approach of event-based mechanism, right? Any change in the database or any change in the state or in a record of a DB, we implemented a slight application layer that triggers that into some sort of another application, say another component. From there, we wrapped that in a lightweight architecture called a microservice, or that can be exposed as an REST or an HTTP. And from there, we went an approach of having an API. So it was a bit tricky, but it was not a cleaner solution for that particular project. And it was very challenging in terms of how you model that and how do you define the domain model or any some sort of a format. But we went back, we assessed that, and then we decided that this is not going to work. So what we did is that we re-architectured the whole mainframe side of thing, and we developed that into a new environment, into a new technology. It was very lightweight. We went with a slightly Java base or some sort of an microservices from MuleSoft side of things, right? And the challenging part was also in terms of the understanding the code. It was written in some sort of an outdated language or outdated technology.
Thank you, Nadeem. Layli, did you have anything that you'd want to contribute for this one?
Yeah, sure. So like what we did, there was an application where we need to do all the files to be visible somewhere in the system that was you can see this is a file system where you cannot build anything out of that. So what we did, we write a small program through which we can pass the information, those files in encrypted format. We introduced a new system called OnBase and then push there. And then we added that, created a connector in the MuleSoft to get added to the OnBase. And then we fetch those information from there and put in their system so that they can view within the 1 click or 2 clicks. So, and also the database, the connectivity, the event based, yeah, we did that as well. But the good thing, what we were having there, they were having the MQ capability. So we pushed the data from the queue, and then we got connected with the MuleSoft at the architecture in the initial phase. But yes, later we just migrated everything from the old legacy system to the MuleSoft. But what we did a product wise. So lower cost product we introduced first. So we saw how it goes. And then later, when we are confident enough that yes, it can be done, it should not affect the customer. Later we have converted the legacy into a new platform. So gradually we have done that, but first we need to look what are the things you can do it for the initial conversion of your legacy so that you can get converted a bit to come to the new platform. Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Layli.
Yeah, as well.
And,
but yeah.
Earlier, Layli, you mentioned that I think you were on the Mule 3 to Mule 4
Yes.
journey. Is that correct? Just on that particular topic, I was curious if that has given you an opportunity to think about the architecture of your solutions and if you were compelled to change things, or were you thinking more of a lift and shift strategy for those existing Mule 3 applications?
Lift and shift, what do you mean by that?
As in just converting the API code from Mule 3 to Mule 4, but you know the segmentation of system process experience APIs would be the same. Essentially, it's a black box conversion. So your consumers don't see any impact, but you've just changed the Mule application from being a Mule 3 app to a Mule 4 app.
Yes,
so
so
which
what
approach
we did first, we don't
taken?
want to break anything out of that. So we easily you can use Mule 3 with Mule 4. So you can call from Mule 4 to Mule 3. That's not issue at all. But gradually behind the scene, we converted that Mule 3 into the Mule 4. So still we are working on that. A few of the application we still need to convert. But what gradually, the first thing what we did, we don't want to touch the existing application. So what we did, we call from Mule 4 to Mule 3, which seamlessly it's working fine, no issues. But before the Mule end of the expire, the Mule 3 version of support, see we are still doing the gradual conversion from 3 to 4. So what we are looking right now, how we can do it in an API led. So we are just going through what's the best way of doing. So you need to find out what your Mule 3 application is that, whether it goes from your experience API or the process API. For us, it is process and the system API, because they are the system-based connectivity and the processes need to be done. Still, we are looking for if we still have anything in the Mule that goes in the experience API. So yeah, that's the way we are going gradually, and we are converting that. Still, we are working on that.
Yeah, to add that, Raw, what we did is that we went with an version-based approach, right? So we had already a V1 running on the Mule 3, and we slowly started refining and refactoring our code for Mule 4, but with a different version and a different instance as such, I would say, right? So we made sure that the RAML, the specs remains the same, and there was no breakage to the consumers or the one who invokes the services, right? But we had some sort of a slightly routing logic in the process API. Based on some sort of an attribute level, we diverted that to a different instance, and that instance or that application was running on a different runtime of 4.2 or 4.3 as such.
Thank you very much, Nadeem. We'll head into our last question, what I think will be the last question for our panel today. And this one I'll ask first to Dom and then to Rob. So the question is, when we look at an organization landscape, what are the parameters to first identify that a system is now a legacy system? So yeah, how does the egg get hatched, or the chick get hatched from the egg right at the start? So Dom, have you got any thoughts around this question?
Right, I'm happy to help that.
Yeah, typically everything we operate with is at the sort of the level that, again, at the level that we get involved in, whether it's legacy or not, really doesn't have a huge impact on what it is that we're doing. We don't tend to go through that sort of a migration. We just come in and link systems together that the client wants linked together. So yeah, yes, I'm probably going to pass this one across to Nadeem.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dom.
That's okay.
So for me, like if the cleaner way to identify a system or an application is legacy is that it uses an old technology, right? So for example, it uses the mainframe and there are very minimal upgrades, and it is running on an old hardware, right? And you're afraid that any changes to the code or any implementation of a new requirement can easily crashes the system. Then that's the best checkbox or a tick box to say that, hey, this lies under the legacy application. And the second thing is that since the technology becomes old, you find very rare skill set people to maintain and develop that you would have, and very less people available in the market. Then it becomes an absolute legacy system, I would say. And the third thing is that there is a very little chances to bring your product or services to the market, right? The innovation is very it's time consuming if you consider in that way. Then that system qualifies for a legacy system, I would say, right? And the fourth point I would say is that the maintenance of that system is very costly compared to the actual original development. So for example, it's 20% than the original development, then it is a good candidate for a legacy, I would say.
Thank you for that response, Nadeem. Rob, was there anything you wanted to share on that?
That sounds fairly accurate, I would say. Definitely. So I've inherited a lot of old technology, and like I said, it was a lot of monolithic applications that really just don't fit within the structure of how we wanted to in our future architectural path. So that didn't match the roadmap. Whereas I mean, sometimes we had a problem over one of our peak periods a few years ago that almost, it was quite a problem where every time we needed to make a change, we had to shut the whole block down at like midnight on a Sunday morning or whatever it was, so that we didn't impact customers, and then hopefully the change would work. And so that was a good way of figuring out which one it would be. And yeah, I think simplification was a lot of how we looked at it. So looking at one provider versus the 4 or 5 different ones that we had, there were just too many different integration tools that we were using. It would be cheaper to use just the one, and so there was a decision that was made on which one we would pick, and a plan to sort of peel the other ones away, and sort of have a look at what lay beneath the hood behind those ones, and then and start to amalgamate them into one into the API strategy, into that API-led strategies, because we didn't have that triple layer architecture before either. So I think when it came down to there was a lot of breaking. So yeah, it definitely there was getting harder and harder to maintain, harder and harder to find the right people to fix, as Nadeem had says. The skill sets get a little bit trickier.
And to add to that point, Roy, so since the industry is evolving, there is a lot of compliance as such. You need to have PCI compliance, you need to have all this the Sachs-Free Oxley's compliance and all the stuff. So legacy system is not that compliance effective because it was developed based on the old guidelines, old technology, I would say.
I would like
Excellent.
2 more points on that. The other one is, the 5th one is difficult to add new feature. Of course, you're not able to add the new feature, then you see it's a legacy. And the 6th one, if the team is working too much manual work. So that's main, you are not, the system is not capable enough to do the automation at all. So.
Yeah, thank you for that, Layli. I think I've seen in my career itself a number of systems that hinder the business's ability to do things rather than enable. And for me, that's usually an indicator that it's now becoming a legacy system and causing workarounds to happen. So yeah, that's a very comprehensive answer. Thank you for sharing it. I think it'll give people something to think about the systems that they work with. All right, we are nearly at the top of the hour. So with that, thank you for that comment, Nick. So we're nearly at the top of the hour, so we'll close the panel off. I'd like to give a huge round of thanks to Dom, Layli, Nadeem, and Rob for taking the time to share their experiences with us and share their thoughts with us today. So thank you very much. If you as an audience member would like to thank the panelists, please say so in the chat, and also please submit the feedback form and say thank you. I will pass on all the positive and constructive feedback to our panelists after the event. That's a great acknowledge the commitment they've made today. With that, let me just check if there's anything else I need to cover. I think we should be good. So just a reminder that the slides and the recording from today's event will be posted up on the event page within the next 12 hours. If you have any feedback about the event as well, that's a great place to use the feedback form to submit that. You do get a chance to win an Amazon gift card as well, so you can get rewarded for your efforts. We do enjoy putting these events together, but we'd also like to know that they're of value to you, so it's a great way to let us know. I think we can close this session now, so I will stop the recording. If anyone does have any comments or questions for us, I'll be around for another 5 minutes or so. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time as panelists as well as audience members, and I look forward to seeing you at the next session.
Thank you very much. That was fun.